Well, what does that look like if we decide to replace Windows at the endpoint? You know, a lot of times people are saying, what about Mac OS or what about Linux at the endpoint? And those are really good options on a small scale. But the cost and prohibitive nature of managing those on a large scale is going to be difficult. How do you ensure compliance? I know the tools out there simply aren't mature enough. What if we could take the best of both of those, right? A good, usable user experience from, say, a Mac OS with kind of the lightweight, secure nature of Linux, kind of put it all together and use that at the endpoint. And that's really what you've got with IGEL OS. So what we're looking to do here is protect you and make it as simple as possible, but also make it as secure as possible. We're seeing the attacks keep coming, right? And this is where I say give up IT completely, become a hermit, embrace nature, because we're continuing to see threats out there, and those threats are continuing to evolve. What we've seen recently is a random or no, a rapid uptick, excuse me, in the use of AI for coding, writing malware. The malware is kind of an AI arms race of how do we protect versus how do we actually do it. And it's becoming more and more cost prohibitive to do so. We're finding where there used to be the concept of a 0-day exploit. Maybe you had 2 months, 6 months, 8 months to fix that. You don't anymore. You have hours before that's exploited. Once that code is there, machines can create it and machines can exploit it much more quickly than any human could. And what does that really cost us, right? It's going to be loss of revenue, loss of productivity, reputational damage, cost of cleanup. We're seeing here, some of you I see are in the medical field, we've got HIPAA 2.0 requirements that you're going to have to be back up and functional to some degree within a 72-hour window. That's almost impossible to do in a Windows environment. I'm going to be honest with you. So what we're trying to do here is say, how do we mitigate this? Speaking of being impossible to do in 72 hours, I was presenting at a Microsoft office, by the way. And this was in Texas last year, right after we had the CrowdStrike outage. This was actually 6 weeks later, and it was still stuck at a blue screen at the Amaranth Bank. This was in their lobby. We just happened to walk down for lunch, and I took a picture of this. So Windows at the endpoint is proving to be a continual problem for businesses of all sizes. How do you manage it? How do you fix it? How do you keep it secure? It's tremendously expensive. So, and I'm going to quote somebody. This guy's a lot smarter than me. And he once said that Windows is the most flexible general purpose operating system ever created. It's 40 plus years of continual development, evolution, millions of man hours. So I quoted myself. It's a little pretentious, but the point is, Windows is a fantastic operating system. I am a shameless fan of Windows, but I want to put Windows where it belongs, right? In the data center, it's protected, where you can run applications, where you have ease of recoverability. You have an ease of deploying applications, centrally managing and controlling it. If there's a problem, a ransomware outbreak that happens to get through the advanced solutions that are there, it's much, much easier to redeploy those gold images, or it's much easier to roll back a cloud PC. Things like the CrowdStrike incident were mitigated on platforms like Windows 365. But again, the problem is still on the endpoint, and the endpoints took weeks or months to correct. So it might sound like I'm bashing Windows again. I don't. I'm a big fan of Windows. In fact, we just had our annual conference. We do 2 of these a year. And this is a good friend of mine, Scott Manchester. He's the VP of product for Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop, talking about what really fits next. So our conference is called Now and Next. We're always pleased to have him as a keynote speaker. This was his 7th time, where he talked about absolutely, Windows in the data center, Windows in the cloud makes the most sense. So how do we get there? And he's been a big proponent of us at IGEL and how we have a very different way of doing that. But what does that really look like? What does Windows and IGEL together look like? What does service delivery look like? And there's really 4 pillars to the way that we deploy IGEL. Like I said, I have legacy hardware, x86, 64 hardware that can run IGEL perfectly. You can deploy IGEL directly onto the systems. We also have the ability to use a secure boot from a USB device. And this is something that allows you to boot into IGEL OS. It will deploy all the configurations, all of the applications that are needed. They stay resident on the USB. Again, there's nothing that can be written other than what we say can be written. And you can use this for situations like call centers, or if you have a BYOD policy where someone has a home laptop and you need them to work later, but you want them to only have secure access to your environment. This really supports a zero trust initiative that a lot of companies are coming down to when dealing with a BYOD device. And for customers that don't have that ability, right, we actually have a new dual boot mode where we can configure your Windows PCs. We can say you're transitioning to IGEL, but you're not quite sure about it. If you do end up in a situation where there's a ransomware outage, an update outage, something like we saw last year, you can easily boot into IGEL OS, and it actually comes with a 90-day license to be able to run that. And then you can choose, when speaking with Choice Solutions, what kind of model does that look like going forward, and what can be transitioned as easily or as quickly to IGEL OS. And then the last one we had, and we just introduced this in March, was our managed hypervisor. This was more of a niche item that was designed for supporting legacy workloads. So we find that we would all love to be on the latest and greatest versions of Windows, but we found that things like ATM machines, medical devices, many of those run Windows 95, 98, NT 4.0, which was my first real foray into Windows management. That have applications that simply won't run in modern environments, or they shouldn't run in modern environments. If they do, they have to be air-gapped, they have to be completely off the network, and they require a lot of labor to manage. So what we decided was, what if we could run legacy workloads and legacy Windows inside the framework of a centrally managed, centrally configured IGEL OS, where we can start and stop virtual machines, transition them, and this use case has proven to be very successful. We don't require any kind of ports to be accessible. Everything tunnels through one port when we're managing it with IGEL OS. So we've now got this fourth way to do that, and that's how I run my desktop. My desktop, I'm talking to you on today, is running IGEL OS. It has our managed hypervisor. I use that for testing and development on Windows as well as Linux. We can even run all the way back to MS-DOS on that. So if I do find a workload that I can't do, or it's not supported by my cloud PC or my VDI infrastructure, I can always spin it up locally. And so there's no reason where IGEL doesn't fit any use case at this point. So let's talk about some of those other mechanisms, right? I talked about the UD Pocket, and that's the ability for us to boot from a USB drive. Clean version of IGEL OS allows us to use devices that are there. This is really cool too if you have been the victim of a ransomware attack and you want to get your infrastructure back up and running. You can take your cloud PCs, you can take your VDI, you can spin them up on demand, only what you need to support your workloads and your businesses. And even if the machine was compromised, the base Windows PC was compromised, we don't write anything to the hard drive. We can boot, we can have you back up in minutes, and all of that data and information is preserved for forensic analysis. So this is just like our dual boot. We don't need to touch the hard drive at all. Everything can happen within the confines of this. You plug it in, you boot up, it's completely separated, completely isolated. It has no access to the local drive, and everything is containerized in this encrypted environment. So again, the most secure way of dealing with that and allowing you to meet those requirements like the upcoming HIPAA 2.0 requirements.